Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Samach Test number 69 Babasra, as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Nusum Basar Shivya. Says the Gemara about 7 lines from the bottom of the page where we left off yesterday, the last 2 dots. Boy, Rabbi Lozer asked this question: Mal ben Oshabsachim, the door frames. Mal ben is like a door frame or a rectangle. So if you have the door frames of the doors, if you sell the house, what about the door frames? Now the door frames today, the way we have them today, it's probably, there's no question they're included because they're all cemented into the house and are nailed in. It's properly installed, and there's no question. Just like the doors included, the door frame as well. But in those days, they weren't actually all so fixed in. So Rabbi Lozer asked this question: is the door frame of a door? What's the halacha? If you sell the house, is the door frame sell with it? If they are cemented in, no question. There's no question. It's attached to the house. Anything attached to the house goes with the house. Kiti boilacha. The question could be, let's say it's just attached with pegs, with wooden pegs, and it can easily be taken out. So the door itself is necessary, but the frame around it, maybe not so much. That question stands. Not clear if that goes with the house. Again, today you wouldn't bother saying, well, we're selling at the house and the door frame is included too, because it's obvious that it's attached. It's permanently attached. Okay, if you say, Rashbam says, do you say that, okay, once you have that question solved, and if you say that the doorways that are only done with pegs, if they're sold, even though it's not so permanently attached, it's still included with the house, that's because the door frame is made to strengthen the whole door passageway. The door and the whole thing is meant for strength. But the frames that they had around windows in those days, and again, windows basically in those days were just holes in the wall. All right, then the key to say, what about if they are attached with pegs? Now, those are only made for beauty. Rashbam says, and they're only made for beauty, and they're not sold. Or do you say, no, since they're attached with pegs, just like if the door frame is attached with pegs, that's included. The same thing with these frames around the windows, and therefore they're sold with the house. But if there's no question, if they're attached with cement, then they're certainly included. So again, just like we saw in the doorway, if it's attached with cement, it's certainly included. What happens if you have the frame of a window, and if that's only attached? If it's only attached with pegs, it's only for beauty. Maybe you're going to take the frame with you. It's only made for beauty. Since it's attached, and therefore it's included with the house. Take this question stands to. Or Malbanos shel kroyamita. What happens if you have a frame for the legs of a bed? What do you mean by frame? They call those casters. That you have the leg of the bed. Let's say you have 4 legs on a bed, and then you have a caster of some sort of a piece of wood or whatever that's underneath the leg to protect the leg from getting dirty or getting decayed in the ground, in the dirt. So you had a protector. It's like a leg protector, a bed leg protector. So what do you say there? Is that included if you're selling a house and you sell everything with it? What would you say there too? Rashbam says 3 lines from the you put these little pieces of wood underneath the legs, because they shouldn't get decayed in the ground. And if you say that the doors and the chalona and the windows are sold with it, because at least they're attached with pegs. But over here they're not attached at all. They're simply leg protectors. Is that sold with it or not? Again, Malvan is back in the Gemara. Yeah, okay. Assuming that the bed is sold with it. Assuming that the bed, if you said I'm including all the furniture, so or if, let's say, the bed was not movable, let's say it was nailed in or whatever. So the question is, what about the leg protectors? Now, if when you pick up the bed, you pick up the caster, the protector with it, no question. It's moved with the bed. So if it's nailed in, if you have these things, let's say you attach this leg protector to the leg itself, you nailed it in. Oh, then it's certainly included. If it's not attached, my take of this question stands too. So the Mishnah said that if you sell a field, now this question we just had is if you sell the house. We went back to the house because he was talking about the watchman's hut out in the field. If If it's attached with cement, then it's considered a permanent structure and it's not sold with the field. So because of that cement, that's why I brought these questions about selling house. But now we're going back to the Mishnah where we talk about selling a field. You sell a field, we said what's included is it the stones that are necessary for the field. We had different opinions about that, or the reeds in a vineyard, which are necessary to hold up the vineyard, to hold up the vines, and things which are attached to the ground, like produce and clumps of reeds that are less than a certain amount, less than a base roba, because that's considered all part of the field. Or a watchman's hut, which is not fastened with cement. And then he said, or a young carob tree or a young sycamore tree, those are part of the field. But what's not considered part of the field are the other thing, the opposite. Stones that are not necessary, the reeds which are not necessary, not the detached produce. And if he said everything is included, those are all included, but you don't include, right? You don't sell Shiva Sheva, but and you don't include these large trees, meaning you have a carob tree which has already been grafted and it's strengthened, or an elderly and a veteran tree, a tree that's been around for a long time. And what does that mean? That it's been branches cut off already, because those are considered like separate fields. Now the Gemara is going to ask about that. Where do you get this idea that if you have an adult tree, call it whatever the proper word is for a tree, you have an adult tree, pardon? A mature tree, good, mature tree. You have a mature tree, meaning if it's a carob tree, it's been grafted. If it's a sycamore, it's been debranched for a while. In other words, it's been around for a while. Like you say, a mature tree. Where do you get this idea that that's a separate field? I sold you a field, and you have these large trees, adult trees in there. So the general idea we're going to see is that if you have small trees, saplings, whatever, that's included with the field. But if you have large adult trees, mature trees, they are considered not part of the field. They're considered like their own fields. Where do you get this from? Money immediately we get it from Amar Bida Marav. This is like summer crop. Pasuk says in Chumash, when Avram bought Maras Machpelah from Ephraim to bury his wife Sarah, the pasuk says like this. Pasuk Yud Zayin in Perek Chaf Gimel. It says like this: by Yokom stay Ephraim, and the field of Ephraim, so to speak, rose up. Asher Machpelah, which is in Machpelah, Asher Mamre, Hasoda, the field, V'amara Shabo, and the cave inside. It's with the burial cave. B'chola eitz Asher B'sad, and all the trees, Asher B'chol Gvulo Saviv, it was within all the borders around. Now, what does Asher B'chol Gvulo add on? It says he bought the field. I bought the field. Now, what's with the field? So the field, the cave in it, and all the trees. Everything is included. That's what the pasuk says. And he brings down in the Bach, he quotes the pasuk I just said. So Rashbam says, what is that word? What does that add on? What do I need that for? It seems extra. Rashbam in the narrow lines says like this, in the middle of the narrow lines, it's extra. I bought the whole field, whatever within the boundaries of the field, including all the trees. So what do you need? Asher b'chol gvula. What does that add on? Well, the Medrash will teach me. In other words, if you have you had this. You used to have this in the South when you sold a big field. There were like the old oak tree. You had a big oak tree. Everybody knew that tree. Everybody knew this palm tree. Everybody knew that tree. That has its own significance, its own importance, just like its own tree. So he's telling you, what does Asher B'chol tell you? That sometimes you need the border of the field to determine which trees are included. When they're young trees, and there could be a lot of young trees there, so there could be an argument. No, that's not my tree, that's your tree. Mishat Tzarech Ligbul, the trees that need a boundary around it to determine what they are. You need a Shlo Yaron, a person shouldn't protest and say, Lomar, those are planted in my land, the Shaliyim. And small trees, thin trees, they're not known by a name. But people forgot who planted them. So you have to make a bull around it to teach me that that's what's included. The trees that wouldn't otherwise, they don't have an independent name. Now, small trees, you need a boundary around them to know that they're part of that field. I will call Charbak Morka, but if you have a mature tree, a carob tree which has been grafted, or Sadan Shikma, or you have an old sycamore tree, Gdolim, Chashuvim. They are large, they are significant. Avshamil said, but he knows, knows that's Yankel's tree, that's some Shmerel's tree. They don't need a border. And that's what we see, that how do you know that these things are independent? Because the pasuk says, and then says Asher b'chol gvulo. Why does he have to say Asher b'chol gvulo? It's to teach me, those words are extra. They teach me that what's included is trees that need a delineation of what's the gvul to know that it belongs to that field. But large trees that stand on their own, it's well known who those trees belong to. Therefore, when I sell the field, those large trees which have their own independent name, Yankel's oak tree, Shmerel's, whatever other kind of tree, any other tree, his sycamore tree, like his Shmerel's sycamore tree, those trees have their own name and they're not included in the field. That's the idea over here. Says the Gemara, again, what's included with the field? Only those that need a boundary around it to determine who they are. They don't have names to it, these small trees. So you wouldn't know where they belong. By having a border around it, you know they belong to that field. Yatsu excluding these, the sycamore and the large sycamore, the carob tree, or a big oak tree, people know this stuff. They don't need it because they have their own name. From here you see that boundaries mean something. And what do we mean by that? So Rashbam in the first of the Y line says, when it means like this, that the boundary is considered with the field. Is the boundary on the edge, not in the field? Or if I buy a field and that's the boundary, the boundary on the field is included with my purchase. That's the point. You acquire the borders themselves. Any of the trees planted on the border, the boundary is considered part of the field. So if the trees form the boundary, they're included with the purchase. Any trees planted on the border, they're included with the field. Around all the trees that are planted in the ground, that's the boundary. Avram acquired. That's the point when he says that's extra. All the trees in the field. I know trees in the field. Even the trees on the border are also included because the border is sold with the field. That's what he means over here, according to Rashbam, that Torah, that the boundary is considered part of the field. It's not external to the field. It's not like that marks the inside of the boundary marks the edge of your field, and the boundary is like independent, but rather the boundary is considered part of the field. That's how Rashbam learns. Ritva learns a little bit differently, and he says that this phrase that Mashar says, "Mikan Meitzarim and Torah," means as follows. He says other people that he brings down Rashbam's shot to teach me how much Machzor, right? And even though Machzor doesn't, we had before that if you acquired then a chasam of a ger and you made a kinyan, you didn't get the boundary. That's because nobody's giving it to you. But when somebody's giving it to you, when I sell you my field, that includes the boundary. That includes the edges also. He said, another shot is this, that if you mention the boundary, that's specific. Before we had the idea that sometimes you draw a picture of it and you just meant a general idea. You made the boundaries wide. It's not specific. He says, no. From over here, you see that talk about Asher b'chol gvulo saviv. That means when you specify a boundary, yeah, that's fixed. That's legal. If I say the boundary, that's the boundary. Don't say I just mentioned it to give you a general idea where it is, but rather it's effective by saying that. Let's say I sold you a field in a large stretch of fields, in a pecan, a big valley or a big plain, and I had a lot of fields there. And sometimes they call a bikanami soda. Sometimes they call a field, they call the whole plain a field. Sometimes they call it individual field. So if I didn't mention the border, you only get the one field. Because that's all I sold you one field. If I didn't mention the border, you get one field. And if you say that mentioning boundaries on the Torah, I made a mitzvah. Okay, I just mentioned it. I gave you a general idea. Hashtem mitzvah deraisa. Some deraisa means the davar shalikar. It's significant. It counts. It's legal. It makes one some chasam cover. If I say I'm selling you a field, and I mark the boundaries around a whole stretch of fields, around a whole bikah, you know what? You get the whole thing. Because when I said started, that also means the whole stretch of fields is referred to as a field. I got a big field over here. You have a small field, right? If I have a lot of fields, sometimes I call it one field too. So if I made the boundary around the whole thing, I have to give you the whole thing. So he says that the Rashba and others, you see that there's two different shatim. The Rashbam says that that the boundary is considered part of the field. If you sell something and that's the boundary is part of the field. The other shot is that when you mention boundaries, it counts. That's legal. You can't say, oh, I was just drawing a general idea. I was just, making it look big or whatever. It wasn't specific. No, it's exactly specific. Could be that both halachas are true. Amar Yehuda. Now we have some rules. Now, generally we speak when we talk about trees. Elon means a tree. It can mean many times. There's thousands of kinds of trees, right? There's also, we know there's a geffen. That's a vine tree, a vineyard, right, from a vineyard. And we also know the famous dekel, that's the date tree or the palm date tree, whatever you call it, the date tree, date palm. Okay, so let's say we're going to talk now about when a person's selling him a field or he mentions trees, what does it mean? If I sell you a piece of field, I'm selling you some ground, some field. It's good to write in it, you acquire in a diklin, the date palms. Rashi says Tolan, the Rashbam says Tolan are small saplings, let's say, that are planted planted there. But hoots and tzitz usually could mean bushes, brush, things like that. Small trees could also mean, he says, could be small kinds of palm trees. I told you I was once in Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania, and I asked him about that. I have two big date palm trees in my yard. The male gives off the seeds every year, and the female doesn't. I don't know how that works. So I asked him. I went and I asked the guy there about, how many palm trees are there? I have two different kinds myself. He says there's 3,000 different species of date palm trees. In any case, so he says here, Rashbam says also hoots and tzitz and also kinds of palm trees. Bars. Okay. So if he mentioned, in other words, when you sell a field and there's trees in the field, it's a good idea to mention, I'm selling you all these kinds of trees with it. The date palm, the dekel, the ta'alin, these other kinds of small saplings, hoots and tzitzim. Even if you didn't write that, you acquire it. In other words, when I sell you a field and there's trees in the field, he's saying, the Mishnah said that if the charav and the sadon are so significant that they're not included, but a regular dekel apparently would be included. He says, even though all these would be even if I didn't specify all these various kinds of trees, you still acquired anyway. It's clearer in the shtar. In other words, it's better to be more specific. To say, I'm including the air conditioning, I'm including the tree, I'm including this and this and this. That's right. It's always like that, right? Always the other ones, the questions are all when it's done, when there's a fight. So it's always better to avoid fights by listing it specifically. So he says, even though it's you acquired anyway, these things are included, these trees, but it's better to mention it so there'll be less of a hassle. There won't be any misunderstanding. Let's say he says, I'm selling you land and I'm selling you trees. Dikli is plural, two trees at least, right? So he said, I'm selling you land and trees. It sounds like, the land includes the trees anyway. So why do you say land and trees? It's mashma, this piece of land with its trees, plus I'm selling you a couple of trees. That's what it sounds like. So he says, we look, if he's got other trees besides the trees on the field, so you all play trade dikli, he's got to give him two trees, because he said, I'm selling you land and I'm selling you trees. If he doesn't have any more trees, he only has this land, but he said, I'm selling you this land and trees. Sometimes you got to go buy two trees, because he said, I'm selling you land and I'm selling you trees. Got to go buy two trees. Something like tradically. If let's say the tree, he has trees, but they're mortgaged, trees were worth a lot of money, right? They produce fruits and stuff like that and strengthen the land. If they're mortgaged, partly he's got to redeem them. Got to go pay off the pay off the mortgage, and get the trees for him. Okay. Park trade, he's got to go redeem from him 2 trees and give it to him. That's if he said, I'm selling you land and palm trees and dickly. Okay, dickly means palm trees. Okay. Arabidically. Now, what if he says, I'm selling you the land with the trees? Arabidically sounds like land with the trees. If he has trees on the field, because he says, I'm selling you a land with its trees. So if there are trees on the field, Yovle, or the Girsa in the Rashbam is saying that it's a good sale. Elav, if he doesn't have any trees in the field, it's a mistake. It's a mistake in transaction, the whole deal's off. Now, Rashbam says, what do you mean? Eino no lakarka. What do you mean deal's off? We said, you asked before about it, you sell land has no price, right? So why is it a mekachtos? He says, even there's no mekachtos in terms of the price. There's no fixed price land, right? A house that costs in this neighborhood $200,000 50 years ago now goes for 20 million. Let's say, it's right. There's no price. There's no price. However, over here it's a mistake because he said, "I'm selling you a land that has trees, and there's no trees." That's a mistake. That's a mekachtos. There he was he was going to das. Rashbam says about halfway down in the wide lines, even though there's no karka, he sells it for a lot. But mekachtos miyav, it's a mistake. I wanted a field that has trees. You told me you've got a field in Australia, whatever, that's got trees. It's 2 acres, got a lot of trees. I come there's no trees. Deal's off. I want my money back. So that's what he said. Arabidically, land with its trees. Let's say he says Arabidically. Let's say he says it's a land that can have trees. It's a tree field. He didn't say I'm selling you land with trees. He says it's a tree field, meaning you can grow trees there. It's a tree field. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm selling you land with the trees. I'm selling you a land that could have trees. So leslitically, he's not entitled to any leslitically. He's not entitled to any trees. Says Rashbam, my timer. The chazulidically, Kamerle. What he meant is it's fit for trees. It's a land in which you can plant trees there. It's good for tree planting. Amalei, let's say the seller tells the purchaser, I'm selling you the field with the exception, I'm reserving for myself this particular tree, this particular chazina. If it's a good tree, it produces a lot. Shiur shari, it's okay. I left that tree for myself. I wanted that tree because I know it produces a lot of fruit. Selling you the whole field except for the one tree. Right? You could ask here, Michael, also, how are you going to get to the tree, right? Same thing would apply, right? Shiur shari. Let's say it's a poor tree, doesn't produce much. Then kolshkein hanach. What he meant to say is this: I'm selling you the field, but I'm keeping myself this lousy tree, this particular tree. Now that's a very poor tree. It hardly produces anything. So if I kept that for myself, I certainly am keeping the good trees for myself. The trees that are better, I'm also meant to keep for myself. That's the understanding of these lashonos. Omalei labar me ilni. Let's say he says, I'm selling you the field with the exception of the trees. Now, the word he used here is ilan, which is a general word, means all kinds of trees. He didn't say dekel. Dekel means a palm tree. Sadna shikmor is the sycamore tree. Charav is a carob tree. He just said, I'm selling you the field without the trees. I'm keeping the trees for myself. So Yisla Ilne, if all he has is all various kinds of trees that don't have a specific name to them, like a significance, Yisla Ilne, I mean, except for the trees. Yisla Dika, if all he has is dekel trees, palm trees, even though they should be called dekel, but he called them Elon, that also works the bar. He says, okay, I'm not selling you the palm trees. Isla Gufne. Let's say all he has is vineyards. All he has is vine trees. The bar migufne. Again, because the geffen, it's still called a tree. It's better to call it geffen. It's better to call sycamore a sycamore. It's better to call it dekel a dekel. But if he said I'm selling the field, accepting the trees without the trees, and he used the general word for trees like Elon. So if all he has is dekel, so he meant to exclude that. If all he has is geffen, all he has vineyard, he meant to exclude that. Let's say he has Ilane the gifting. Let's say he has regular trees and vines and vine trees. Then lebar mi ilni. Why? Because when you use the general lashon of trees, and you have trees and you have vineyard and you have vine trees, well, the general word of trees applies more to regular trees than to vineyard, even though if all he had was vines, then he meant to exclude that. But if he had vines and he had other trees, then he meant to exclude the other trees. In other words, he sold the geffen. Ilanividically, let's say he has regular trees and he has palm trees, the bar milne, again, the same thing, because the dekel, the palm tree, is called the dekel, and the geffen is called the geffen. Other trees are just called Elan. They're not as important. So if he says, I'm excluding Elan, and he has Elan and Dikli, so he meant to exclude the Elan because he assumed that if he wanted to exclude the palm trees, he would have said Dekel. Gufni b'Dikli. Let's say he has vines and palm trees. Now both of those have significant names, Geffen and Dekel. And all he said was, I'm excluding the Elan. So which one is it? Labarmi Gufni. Because when it comes to Dekel and Geffen, the general word Elan is more specific to the vineyard, because the dekel is considered more significant in terms of trees. The dekel would have been better named dekel rather than the geffen. And if you're going to apply the word Elan to geffen or dekel, you're going to apply it to geffen and say that the dekel is a more specific one. And when he says except for the trees, he meant to exclude the vineyard. Amar Rav, Kol she'olma b'chevel Shiur. Now Rav is going on this. Rashbam, 2 lines from that page. He's going on what we said before. If I said except for trees, now what do we mean by except for trees? Which trees are we talking about? So Rav says anything which akol she'olma b'chevel Shiur, anything, any tree that in order to harvest the tree, to pluck the tree, in order to get the fruits off it, anything that you have to climb with a rope. In other words, it's a tall tree. You have to climb with a rope to get it. That's what he meant to exclude. If it's a short tree that you don't have to climb up on it, then he didn't even mean to exclude that. In other words, when I said, I'm selling you except for the trees, he really meant, I want to keep this tree for myself. It's producing a lot of fruit. So what's the definition of a tree that's producing fruit? A tree that you have to climb up with a rope, that's considered, I'm reserving that one for myself and keeping myself. If it doesn't, not necessarily to climb it with a rope, then you didn't exclude that, and that's included with the sale. That's what Rav says. But Dayane Gola, that's Shmuel and Karna, so it's like another machlokas, Rav and Shmuel. If it's a machlokas, we'll see. But Dayane Gola, the judges of the exile, Amre, they say Kol shel ol kovsho Rav Shiur. Here's what's not excluded. What's included in the sale. Anytime when they take the yoke with the 2 oxen underneath it to plow the field, and they go near the tree, and if the yoke can bend the tree, meaning it's not a strong, firm tree, and the yoke, when it hits the tree, can bend it, kosho or kovsho, that's not a shear. You don't leave it, because that's like an insignificant tree. Kosho ain't all kovsho, if it's a very tough, strong tree, firm tree, and the yoke cannot bend it, then that's what I meant to leave over. And that's when a person says, I'm selling you fuel with the exception of the tree. Which trees are we talking about? So the general idea is we're talking about big, strong trees. So Rav uses the example. He says, if you got to climb it with a rope, to pluck all the fruits off, that's a significant tree which you meant to exclude from the sale. Other ones could be included. Shmuel and Karna say, well, he defines it as if the yoke would bend the tree, that's like an insignificant tree, and that's included with the field. The Gemara says this machlokas between Rav, parent machlokas between Rav and Shmuel on the one hand, Shmuel and Karna on the other hand, it's not really machlokas. Are we talking about palm trees? Or are we talking about other trees? So Rashbam says like this. Take a look at Rashbam in the first of the narrow lines in the Rashbam. Habadikli Milsa Rav. Rav's talking about dekel trees, palm trees, which grow very tall, right? So Habailni, and the other one, and Shmuel is talking about other trees. Sheol Kovsho. The Shir Daliyas Chevelo Shayach Behu. In other words, when it comes to other trees, not the dekel tree, so it doesn't make sense to talk about climbing it with a rope. The below Chevelon, you can go out without a rope too. They're not that tall to begin with. How much possible? You can easily harvest the tree without climbing it on anyway. The shear decrease sol nami equal maimer, and the shear of bending the tree, you can't say particularly. Even if the yoke would cause the tree to bend, it's chashuv imol mechevel. In other words, it depends. It's still, if you still need a rope to climb a decal tree, a palm tree, it's considered chashiv even if it could be bent. So they're talking about different kinds of tree. Rob's talking about a decal tree. There, the shiur is what's considered reserving the tree for myself if you need to climb up with a rope in order to get the fruit. And Shmuel and Karnu who say that the shiur of what's considered chashiv, anything which the yoke would not bend, is speaking about other trees. We're not talking about trees that have great height to them. All right, we'll pick up here tomorrow from Boimina Ravacha Merafuna, the third line. We'll pick it up from there tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a good day, everybody. Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. Chodesh Tov.